What is, ooh, there we go. Let everyone in, let everyone in. Kick out the
Oh,
bot,
sweet.
kick
We can
out the
see everyone.
bots. Yeah, we can see everyone. We can see everyone. At least on Zoom.
Ah,
It's
sick.
multi-channel, so we'll get
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
others across. I am gonna kick out the fathoms. Only
You don't kick
fathoms.
my fathom out. I'm gonna send this to my team.
What is up, everybody? Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where in the world you're calling from. And if you've been part of these awesome sessions before, the way we tend to run this is we heat up the chat. So drop it in. Paul knows. Paul knows. Paul from London knows. Paul from London knows. I got London, Pakistan. We got Lviv. Please, can you share the recording of the last session? Yeah, it's in this Slack channel. We got Montreal. We got Dallas. All right, show off, Nick. We got Bangalore, Armenia. We've got the Philippines, Toronto. We got India, Austin, Costa Rica. All right, we're Mr. Worldwide. I had to throw that. I had to throw that in there. All right, everyone, welcome on board. We're gonna get some more people joining. This is an absolutely fired session. We've got over 700 people registered. We've got a couple of hundred already live in this event itself. We'll keep it super productive and valuable. For those who do not know, I will do my best to serve justice to everything that Nick Abraham is. Um, and we'll jump straight into it. But before we do that, some fun little housekeeping things for all of you who've just joined. Number one, for all of you, whoever stay back till the end of this session, we're gonna give 5 lucky winners at random, as we've done that every single office hour for the past few weeks. 12,000 email verification credits on the house from Smartlead that does cash flow verifications as well. Email verification through and through, best in the class, that continuously keeps upgrading and is consistently maintained and managed across all the live data that we have and we collect as well. Second thing, for those who have seen it and not have seen it, Smart Delivery now has a super fun challenge that is live where you get to upgrade to the next tier simply by following the rules that have been shared on Slack channel for free. And SD or Smart Delivery is now unlimited in the number of tests that you can do on the Pro as well as the Expert plan and the big kahuna one that all of you have been after. You can warm up your actual campaign copy with your actual variables, with your actual data, which has been massive. I think everyone's wanted that, but always had a concern on privacy. We've handled that for you as well. So winner, winner, chicken dinner, right? Exactly what's happened and exactly what's going on with the deliverability upgrades with respect to copy being a higher focus. We've got that sorted for you with Smart Delivery, and obviously Smart Send is there as well. So very quick things. Stay back till the end. 5 of you get 12,000 email verification credits each that also do catch-alls as well and valid catch-alls too. Second, Smart Delivery is live with a fun challenge for all of you. Super simple. Whatever plan you're on, you just need to go ahead and share one LinkedIn post about your results on Slack and on LinkedIn. Tag us, and then we'll upgrade you to the next plan for free for 14 days on the house. You'll be taken care of, and you will get the best in class data. We'll drop the Slack channel in one quick second. With that being said, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. We've got one of the best email marketers in the world, Nick Abraham, the guy who pretty much invented automations for agencies, manages over 200 clients with like a super tiny team simply because of how efficient he is in the way he runs his business, and also has been one of the key innovators behind a lot of smart lead stuff, right? Just setting that up for you all. Subsequences has come from Nick Abraham. A lot of the AI categorization help has come from Nick Abraham. Nick has also given us help around the algorithms, whether it has to do with Outlook setups, and he's also helped us out understand certain things on how Outlook delivery works. So Nick, for all intensive notes, catches up with me almost once a month to give me advice on how to be better at what we do. So you're dealing with one of the best in the world right now, and I mean that without any hype at all. So Nick over here is going to spend the next X amount of time walking us through how he handles deliverability at scale, sending millions of emails consistently for his business and for his clients as the people he advises as well. So, sir, floor is yours. How you going?
Doing good. You just hyped me up like crazy. So hopefully I live up to the hype and we can
No
hopefully
pressure.
learn a couple new things in here. Yeah. For sure. I'm
No,
feeling it.
no pressure.
Cool. Can I go ahead and screen share and then I can kind of get into
Yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah. We can jump straight into it. No time to waste.
Sweet. Let's go. Sweet. So I made a presentation today, mostly about deliverability. I think this is going to be completely irrelevant in like a year. I think this changes so frequently now that this is kind of what's working right now. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. This is what's working for us. We manage over 150 plus clients at Leadbird. I've been in the email space for 4+ years. And so, yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell. Currently, right now, inside of Smartlead, we have 46,000 email accounts. That's literally a screenshot from today morning. And if you don't know me, just type in Nick Abraham on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitter, and you'll see that I've been posting content for 5 years. And a lot of the takes I've had on deliverability have changed dramatically. And so, yeah, I kind of want to just like talk about where a lot of people are messing up with their infrastructure and what I would do to make the adjustments and kind of how to assess things and how to keep your costs low and all that good stuff. But let's go ahead and start with like what's the current issue that I see with a lot of people. So everyone, I'm sure in here is using some kind of reseller of some sort, and if you kind of look at how these resellers set up their infra, a majority of the resellers, I've gone through probably like 6 to 8 of them. They use what are called EDU or nonprofit panels, and so that's a huge red flag. And let me kind of explain what that is, right? So Google and Microsoft, they have programs set up to where if you're an educational institute or if you're a nonprofit, they basically give email accounts for free. So what happens is people kind of abuse that in the cold email world. They'll go to countries like Singapore or India where the restrictions are a little less, and they'll go set up schools and they'll go set up nonprofits and then go apply for this. And then basically the benefit here is that Google gives it to them for free. They're not charging them on a monthly basis for the amount of accounts that they have like they do to us. And so then cold emailers will use this and then resell it to other cold emailers. And the biggest issue, like if it worked, I would tell you guys to use it, right? And it did work at a certain point, but the issue now is that so many people do it. And there's a lot of like issues with how Google and Microsoft identify it. They'll just shut down the entire panel, right? And a lot of these resellers, what they do is they just group all of their customers in one singular panel. And that's where the issue happens. And so, like if we all use the same guy, right? And he puts us in an EDU panel that has 10,000 licenses in it, I might be sending some crazy nonsense in my email copy that gets a huge spam complaint rate. Or, maybe I just, make it to where that email account is sending way above its inbox limits. And now your inboxes get impacted because of that, right? And so if you're using a reseller, I would really identify, one, are they like a legit reseller that's, listed on Google or Microsoft's page? Because you can just look it up and see if they are. And if they're not, identify if they're using an EDU or nonprofit panel. And if they are using EDU or nonprofit panel, I would probably not use them in any case because they're just grouping you in with all their other users. And like the biggest issue that I've had at my agency over the last 4 years is obviously deliverability being one of the most difficult things to overcome. Whenever we had issues, it usually came from whenever we had our highest churn months, it would just come from us like having deliverability issues and like panels getting shut down. And so this just causes a lot of instability. And so you just want to avoid resellers that are doing this. The best way to check, like I said, is, you could go look up on Google and Microsoft's registry to see if they're like an actual licensed reseller. The other way to do it is using 2 tools. So for Google, you could just like actually set up forwarding, and the confirmation email that you get will actually tell you who the reseller is. And you can go look them up to see if they're a legitimate one or if they're just like a panel, like an educational panel. If it's an educational panel or a nonprofit panel, it'll literally say that in the name. That'll usually say like, Nick Abraham Institute of Arts or something of that sort. And so then immediately, hey, this is an educational panel or a nonprofit. The other one is using this tool that Jesse, I'm sure everyone in here knows Jesse. He's been on a couple of these webinars as well. He made a tool where you can actually type in the domain that you have and it'll go identify if it's on a Microsoft tenant. And then you could actually see all the other domains that are in that tenant. And so this is a really big one because if you take any one of these resellers, you can go look up and see all the other domains and all their other customers that are in that tenant that are shared with you. And so you just want to avoid this. Obviously, there's just a lot of instability that comes with it. You want to use like verified resellers, which, if you look at Smart Senders, both of the providers that they have are legitimate. And past that, what they do is they isolate your accounts, right? So your orders aren't being grouped in with other panels or other users. They're isolated to the order that you make, which I think is a very big thing when it comes to stability. The other issue that's happening with a lot of these resellers is if they're not using any level of automation and they're doing this manually, like most of these resellers are, they're just not setting up the infrastructure correctly, right? The very basic core thing that we all do, which is applying the DNS records properly, they just don't do it, right? And whenever you do like an MX toolbox checkup, right, on the domain, and it says the SPF, DKIM, and DMARC is there, it's actually just saying that the DNS record exists. It doesn't mean that it's actually passing the authentication. And so whenever you get an inbox from any reseller, the first thing you should do is either use Smart Delivery to identify this, or just send yourself an email and
Nick,
examine the
before we
original
jump in,
headers.
just one question
Yeah.
for you, mate. If you don't mind explaining to some of the people what a reseller actually is in a contextual perspective.
Yeah. So like there's so in so basically what happens is Google and Microsoft, they basically have a program set up to where people can like legitimately resell their Google Workspace accounts, and it'll be a little cheaper. And that's basically what a reseller is, right? Like they basically get panels and they're licensed to do this so from Google and Microsoft to be able to sell on behalf of them. That's basically what a reseller is, in a nutshell, right? A lot of people pose as resellers when in reality they just go buy these EDU panels from some black hat websites, and then they just use that to give like people actual accounts. And so you just want to avoid those. That's the big thing. And like there's other email platforms that are doing setups, and if you kind of go look up their reviews, you'll kind of see that a lot of them are using EDU panels on the back end, which and it makes sense for them, right? Like the person that's actually selling it, like they make the complete margin on it. Like they don't get charged on the actual user, and so you're paying maybe $1 to $3 per inbox, which is a win for you, right? Because you're like, hey, the cost is way cheaper, and for them it's an even bigger win because they make the entire $3 on it. But the issue is just instability with it, right? You get grouped in with all these other people, and then you have no control if your account is live today or dead tomorrow. And so that's the big thing, right? You want to find legitimate resellers that are actually licensed by Google and Microsoft to be reselling on behalf of them. Um, cool to keep going, V?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. Fabulous explanation.
Awesome. Yeah. And so, like I mentioned, right, and this is the other thing too with resellers, a lot of them that are doing the manual setups. And when I say manual setups, like, you make an order and they take 24 to 48 hours to deliver. That means that they're doing this manually. They're literally going and buying your domain. They're, going into the EU panel or whatever it is and setting it up. They always make mistakes, right? They usually hire people that are getting paid way below minimum wage and will usually make mistakes because they're just trying to go as fast as they can, right? And so this happened to us, like, for the longest time ever, and I think at this point we're probably at like, 40 to 50 clients 2 years ago. I was thinking like, oh, hey, we're good. I do the MX check, all our records are good, but I'm still having pretty bad deliverability. And I can't remember who I had this conversation with, but they were like, hey, send me an email. And I sent them the email, and then they're like, dude, like none of your records are passing. And then I'm like, huh, that's so strange because I look at my DNS, like I can see the DKIM key here, right? And I can see that the DMARC is here. And I can see that, I can see this, but it's not passing. Why is that? Well, it's because they're just copy and pasting the same DKIM key across everybody. And that's not how it works. And so just send yourself an email, this is on Gmail. If you just click show original, you go look at the email header. It'll literally tell you if it's passing or not. I think that's a very, very big thing to do. And then the other thing too is also just like sometimes when you get the account, it's just, and this I see this a lot with Microsoft. Like the DKIM could be active on day one, but on day two, for whatever reason, like they just disable the DKIM key, and then you just have to hop back in and enable it for it to actually work. And so this is something that I see with a lot of resellers. So it's just something to kind of keep an eye out for whenever you're assessing what resellers to use. And then just other Microsoft issues that we've seen recently. And so just like things that you need to kind of build systems in place for. So one thing we've noticed is if you create a new tenant on Microsoft, so tenant is the same thing as like a panel. What happens is like you need it to like you need to let it sit for a little bit. You can't just like create the tenant, put the domain in there, create the inboxes, and put it in Warmup immediately. What we've noticed is that whenever we do that, typically we'll start to be allocated a low IP for Microsoft, or it'll just not even send emails at all. And so that's one thing. You have to kind of let the tenant like age. It doesn't need to age for long. Like we've been just like whenever we create a tenant, we'll let it sit there for 5 days and kind of go there. We're also kind of seeing that whenever we have multiple domains in a tenant, we typically get worse results. So kind of isolating every tenant with a singular domain is what we're seeing work really well. The other thing too is that Microsoft will disable your accounts without you really realizing. And so what you need to do is take the domain, do an MX check, and you can see if the SMTP is still active. And so just go to MX Toolbox, literally put the domain in. I think it says like solve email deliverability issues. You click that. And if you scroll down, it'll tell you if your SMTP is still active or not, or if it's disabled. That's the easiest way to do it. And you can run automations to do that on a daily basis. But yeah, sometimes Microsoft will just disable your account if they think like there's any kind of fraud risk behind it. So like, they're pretty harsh on like using virtual credit cards, for example. And so like that's something to just kind of keep an eye out for. And then like if a lot of people are logging in from the same IP, creating a whole bunch of these tenants, they kind of, will kind of look at that. And they disable it usually on like day 5 or day 7. So like you may get through the sign up process, go create that account, connect it all in, and you're like, hey, all is good. But then on day 5, like you'll notice that you're not getting any replies to your campaign. And then if you go check, you'll see that usually it's disabled. The other issue we've been seeing is what is called a tenant threshold issue. So I think Microsoft has made a lot of changes in the last like 30 to 45 days where like the amount of emails that come out on a daily basis needs to be a lot lower than what it used to be. And so, whenever you have, let's say like 50 inboxes in one panel and they're all sending, 15 to 20 warm up emails, like I think that alone is like too much volume to be coming out of a singular tenant. And so then they start to freak out and then they'll just like give you this threshold error. And kind of like whenever you send an email out, it just auto bounces and it'll say like, hey, you've reached a threshold error. There's nothing you could really do on that. You can speak to their support and sometimes get the account back, but a lot of times you can't, and you just need to take those domains out and try again in another tenant. And then the other thing
Awesome.
that we've been seeing is just,
Nick,
yeah, go
if
ahead.
you don't mind, I'll just hold for a second because the chat's blowing up with questions. So I'll
Yeah,
just answer a few questions that people have. So we'll keep it simple. I think you've said tenant a few times and everyone's losing their mind over it. I've repeated a few times, everyone. So tenant is simply just like a workspace. If any of you have set up a Microsoft or Gmail account, the first thing you do is get a workspace or a tenant. That's the very first thing that you do. So tenant is basically a group or a top line infrastructure, an admin account, for lack of better words, under which you can then select multiple domains or buy multiple domains and then buy for each domain set up multiple mailboxes per domain. So the tenant is the overarching account that Microsoft says. So Microsoft uses the word tenant, Gmail uses the word workspace. So hopefully that helps everyone out there. Now there's 2, 3 questions, Nick, if you don't mind me having you answer, just so that we keep the rhythm running.
yeah, let's do it.
The first question people have is how many mailboxes per domain do you recommend? How many domains per tenant do you recommend? Do you see or any
Yeah,
sort of information that you can list there? Yeah.
yeah. So for Microsoft, I think you just keep it one domain per tenant. With the amount of mailboxes, I don't think that really matters too much. What I think matters is like how much volume is being sent across all those mailboxes. I think like per tenant, you should try to not exceed more than like 1,500 emails in total per day. And I think even that's a little high. I would, to be safe, like 1,000. Obviously Microsoft doesn't put any kind of like info out there of like what is their threshold error and stuff, and like how much you can send per day.
Yep.
But yeah, whenever we have Warmup turned up, and like we're sending more than like 1,000 emails on Warmup and Bold per day, like we tend to run into the issues a lot quicker. The other thing I've realized too is that you run into a lot of these issues early on if you just like get the tenant and create the inboxes and start spamming, right? Like you got to let it kind of sit there for a little bit, and then a lot of these issues typically don't pop up.
Okay. Okay.
Sweet.
The question I
Keep it
then
rolling.
have to sort of, yeah, just before you keep rolling, I think
Mhm.
a common question everyone's going to have right now, you can answer this towards the tail end or later, which is, have you figured out how to solve for the whole Outlook placement right now? Or have you also paused sending to Outlook mailboxes at the moment?
Yeah, so we actually didn't like pause just to Outlook, and the reason why is because so like everything happens in waves, right? So like I think like Outlook is definitely harder to deliver into right
Yeah.
now, but I also think that like just emailing straight into Google is not a good thing either.
Got
And
it.
so like the reason why I say this is like if you just isolate Google and you send, let's say like 500 emails with a singular domain over the course of like 4 or 5 days, I think Google identifies that because like what happened to us is whenever we started isolating Google, we started having like the message after about 5 days saying like Google suspects your message as spam, so it's blocking it, and so we're getting that issue. And so I think it's like I would just keep it blended. I would just keep focusing on the volume because I think like what we're seeing right now, specifically in the last week or so, is that Microsoft is kind of easing up again, and I think everything just kind of rides in waves.
Got it. Got it. Noted. Okay, fair enough, man. Thank you. That's super helpful. Yep.
Sweet. And so the way to troubleshoot a lot of these things, one is just literally go into the message trace inside of the Exchange Center on Microsoft's Admin Center. And by the way, a lot of this may sound really confusing. If you just go into and like to me, I'm not a technical person by any means. If you just go into ChatGPT and you just literally type in like Microsoft Tenant or Microsoft Exchange Center, how to do the message trace. It'll literally show you exactly how to do this and kind of help you like identify, how to kind of like keep researching and learning a lot of this stuff. That's kind of how I learned all this. I kind of learned all this, I would say, in like the last like year. So yeah, if anyone's like confused, take this video, transcribe it, put it into ChatGPT and say, hey, simplify this. That's the best way to go about it. Anyways, best way to troubleshoot a lot of these things, right? So first is just like log into the actual interface, not through Smartlead, through the actual like email account in itself, and then just send an email out to yourself and see if it actually bounces or like what error comes up, or if the email is even landing into your inbox, or if it's missing. That kind of helps you identify and start seeing what's going on. The other thing too is if you go into your admin center on Microsoft Tenants and you go into the Exchange Center, you can actually look at this thing called message trace. It's the coolest thing ever. I think it's the best feature that Outlook made. It literally shows you every single email that went out. And then you can
Yep.
see if it delivered, got filtered as spam, or if I think they have another one that just like says like blocked or not. And so this is like the best way to like go and see if like, hey, my emails are even just going out. And so yeah, that's basically everything on the deliverability side that we've been just kind of noticing. So you're probably wondering like, okay, you talked about a lot about issues, a lot of the things that are kind of going on, like what are you doing to fix it? So what we're currently doing right now, and this is the setup that we're installing for all of our clients at Leadbird, is basically two Hypertide orders. So Hypertide, they're basically like an official reseller of Microsoft, and they kind of do something on Azure's communication API, something of that sort. And basically what they do is they give you 4 domains, 200 inboxes. So that's 50 inboxes per domain. And the reason why we use them, kind of like it solves a lot of the issues that we talked about earlier, right? They put every domain on a dedicated Microsoft tenant, and then it's not shared with other users, right? So if I take Jesse's tool and I put in the domain, I'm not going to find any other domains in there outside of the one I purchased. Your domain volume is super low. So like it tends to have less burnout, right? So if you have 50 inboxes per day on one domain, you're only sending about 100 emails out of that domain. And then you typically don't run into any of those threshold issues that I mentioned either, just because the volume is so low per tenant, right? 100 cold with about another 200 warm. So in that one tenant per day, like your volume doesn't really exceed 300 total emails across all the accounts, which is well below their average, I would assume. And then you also just get the API access, which will kind of tie into some of the automations that I'll talk to you at the end. I'll talk about at the end. The other thing we've been doing is diversifying our setup. So we've been using Mailreef as well. On Mailreef, we'll set up 3 domains and then 15 inboxes total. So each domain is getting 5 inboxes. So you're probably wondering why. So they're an SMTP. So I still think that Google and Microsoft accounts are weighted better than an SMTP, but they're a great backup. Why? Well, because Google and Microsoft, they do everything they can to make sure that you're not sending cold emails, right? So they'll disable your accounts out of nowhere. I think how they go about identifying accounts is constantly changing. And so just to have Mailreef on the backup whenever that does happen, I think is a very big thing at our agency because we're looking for stability more than anything. The other thing too is their CEO, and I'm sure he'll probably come up on one of these. His name is Michael. He built and sold Warmup Inbox, so he's been in this space forever. If you look and analyze a lot of the SMTPs that are out in the market, a lot of them are just made by like a marketer, and their backend is really unstable. If you're looking at an SMTP, I think, and I really do believe this, it's like you have to look at their team and know that they're very technical. It's one of the reasons why I go to Smartlead. Like I knew V ran a very large dev agency before starting Smartlead. And so I knew that like, hey, like in this space, a lot of it is being very technical. I need someone that is technical, that is the CEO, the leader that's running this.
Without taking
And then
bias,
obviously,
I agree. I think that's one of the reasons why I back Michael, regardless of what happens as well, because, and that's why, by the way, Mailreef is also a listed vendor on Smartlead for smart senders, is simply because warm up inbox, the sheer factor that they were the one of the solo first companies that actually built the warm-up infrastructure outside was absolutely incredible. And then when you speak, you just realize how much him and his brother know in the tech space. And one of the cool things about Mailreef is dedicated IPs, right? It's a
yeah,
solo infrastructure that's not shared compared to any other platform where they may have some sort of any other SMTP platform where they may have shared infra.
exactly. And yeah, I think like that's the biggest thing, right? Like a lot of these other providers that are selling like an SMTP solution, they share your servers and your IPs across their other users. With Mailreef, it's literally isolated to yourself, which is huge. And then what I've noticed with Mailreef as well is like if you warm up the domains for a longer period of time, so if you do like that 30 to 45 day warm up on a Mailreef order, they actually do really, really well, like surprisingly well. And then obviously you just don't have the fear of disablement since like he built this in for cold emailing. And then obviously they have API access as well, which is I think a big one. And then we basically just have a whole bunch of non-branded domains. And so this one's big. If you're a lead gen agency, I think this is huge. If you're not a lead gen agency, it's probably not as relevant. But basically, we have 2,000 domains, about 4,000 inboxes split between Google and Microsoft. And what this is just like domains that are just like, you know, getmarketingsolutions.com, tryconsulting.com, just like a whole bunch of random generic domains that we use to backfill our clients' email volume if Hypertide is down or if Mailreef is down, because that happens, right? Like sometimes a Mailreef order just does do bad. Sometimes randomly. Same thing with Hypertide, and Hypertide's infra is built on Microsoft. So if like you have, let's say a lead list of people that their infra is not inboxing well when you're sending from Microsoft, like your Hypertide order is just not going to do good. And that's not to say that Hypertide isn't delivering well. It's just not delivering well to that recipient at that time. And so that stuff always changes. And so that's kind of like our entire setup where that we're doing. And then the way we're kind of going about like the management of it is in month one, campaign one, we usually use Hypertide A. So that's 2 domains, 100 inboxes. In month 2, we use campaign 2, Hypertide B. So we'll flip them, right? And so in that second campaign, we're using 2 domains, 100 inboxes again. And so we're rotating the senders and we're letting the other sender just sit on Warmup. And then after every campaign, what we'll do is we'll run a smart delivery test. And just to see like, okay, is this domain, is this order burnt out? Yes or no, right? And if it is, then all we're doing is just rebuying a new order on Hypertide. And then we're going through and just letting it sit on Warmup while campaign 2 is running, right? If it's not, great, we'll just keep it on Warmup and then we'll rotate it back in month 3. And then if we notice that neither Hypertide order is delivering well because of kind of like the reason I mentioned earlier, like the recipients on the lead list, their infra is just not, or Microsoft is just having issues with their IPs or whatever it is, then we can backfill it with Mailreef. And if Mailreef is still not delivering well, or we had a whole bunch of our accounts just disabled and we need to supplement the volume, that's when we bring in the non-branded. So that's kind of like our process across the board, across all our clients on how we're just managing this. And it's been working pretty well. I think like we're starting to see the results start to pick up. It doesn't work for every use case, and there's obviously been some edge cases where we haven't had the greatest deliverability. But I'd say like right now we're consistently hitting, 3% reply rates across the board, which is pretty solid in my opinion compared to where it was 6 months ago. And so that's pretty much all the stuff right there. And then whenever you're just assessing infra providers, like this is how I would think about it. It shouldn't be anyone that's using an EDU or nonprofit panel. You need to make sure that your orders are isolated per domain or per yourself, right? You need to have API access so that the order delivery time is below 24 hours. Like if you look at Hypertide and Mailreef, their delivery time is within like 2 hours, which is phenomenal. And then when it comes to choosing an SMTP provider, kind of like what I mentioned before, like the founder should be very technical and have experience in the cold email world. So like if you look at Michael, Warmup Inbox, sold it, built that way back in the day. I think it was like the second biggest provider outside of Lemlist that came out. And then just make sure that they're making dedicated orders or dedicated servers isolated per customer. I think that's the biggest thing. If you can isolate and kind of keep everything as separated as you possibly can be, it just allows you to have a lot more stability whenever you're running cold emails for yourself or your clients. And then this is like all the other stuff. And by the way, when I made this presentation, I was like, hey, I don't want to make a presentation going over the basics, right? Because I think
Yeah.
we talk about that all day long. We post about it
Mhm.
on Twitter and LinkedIn all day long. I was like, okay, let's go into something that most people don't even know. And this is kind of that, right? So just things to consider when running campaigns. Like we always run stuff in plain text. We don't turn on open rates or open tracking at any point. You need to make sure you validate your leads, even if the database that you're getting it from says that they're triple verified, like validated with an external source. We always use Million Verifier, super affordable, have a great API. And then whenever it comes to actually emailing the leads, like whatever you're getting from your SMTP valids. So like if you're using Million Verifier, they're an SMTP validation tool. Like
Mhm.
email their valids before you start to email the catch-all valids. I even run a
Mhm.
catch-all, verification tool, but like we'll supplement that in after we email all the SMTP valids, just because you're almost guaranteed to inbox or guaranteed to not have that bounce whenever you're using like an external SMTP validation tool. And then spin tax, I think this one's a big one. You can't just be sending the same copy over and over again. At the bare minimum, if you don't have like any crazy AI personalization or anything of that sort, like you want to spin tax the greeting. So, put different variations of saying, hey, first name. You want to do closings. I recommend putting quotes at the bottom of your signatures, and also just rotating your signature and the way it's formatted as well. I think those are the easiest places to put spin text and where you could repeatedly put the same stuff and be cool. And then the other piece that we've just started doing recently is like we stopped trusting a lot of the lead filters that we get from Apollo and other databases. Just because like, you could say marketing and advertising is the industry, but if you kind of look at the lead list and you look at, 10,000 leads, it's probably going to be closer to like a 60 to 70% accuracy. And so like make sure you're using GPT-4 to kind of grade it and identify if the industry actually matches that. I think I have a YouTube video on that. If you guys are confused what that mean by that, but it's basically just saying like, it'll analyze your lead list and say, yes, this is an agency. Yes, this is an agency. No, this is not an agency. And then you could just make sure you email the ones that are accurate there. And then this one's a big one. I think like if you could find some level of like an intent behind what or who you send to, and you can mention that in your copy, it just performs better, right? So like one of our favorite ones is like if they follow a company on LinkedIn. I'm sure you guys probably have gotten emails where they're like, hey, I saw that you're following Smartlead on LinkedIn. And then they come in with the copy and the pitch. If it's relevant, it does really well. And then if you guys are using the company name or title, like it just needs to be formatted using 4.0 mini or just not used at all. Because if you're sending cold emails right now and it says like, hey, I noticed that you work at Smartlead LLC, like there's a high chance that the person reading it knows it's a cold email and they're going to mark your stuff as spam. And so you just want to avoid that. If you don't know how to do all that technical stuff, like just leave it out of the copy and you'll be fine. So that's pretty much everything on the deliverability side. I'll kind of show you some of the automations that we built. Um, so one thing we've been using a lot is Replit. You could also use like cursor.ai. So I have a dev team on both Scrubby as well as like our agency. And we always build some crazy automations. And I have like a huge backlog of like things I want to build, but we just don't get the time to be able to do so just because of, the priorities that we have to have in place. And so one thing I actually built using Replit, and Replit's super easy to use. It's literally like ChatGPT, but then you can have it like write and build code and interfaces and then build it into an API and then deploy it as well. We built this thing basically where we're able to make a call to Hypertide and Mailreef. And so like, I don't know if you guys can see this really well. Let me see if I can zoom in, but basically like our team can come in on our project management board and input the domains that we want to purchase and the names that the inboxes we want, and basically just, send a webhook with this data to Mailreef and Hypertide's API and then automate the inbox creation. So this has been pretty cool for us because like, we'll do two things. One is like when we get a new client, CSM gets a task assigned and the project management board that's like, hey, create inboxes for this client. And they can just go do that right through there. And this is like, full end to end. It'll buy the domain, it'll create the inboxes, it'll add it to your Smartlead account, and then, put the proper warm-up settings that you want. So it's like super cool to see. And then also whenever we have a notification system where if a domain's reply rate consistently has been dropping month over month, we'll go ahead and just automate a task that says, hey, buy new inboxes or create new inboxes for this client. And it's the same thing like that. So that's something that we built with Replit. Other things that we built that I think kind of help in the deliverability front. So this one, we did this a long time ago. I really don't know if it makes a huge difference, but I kind of feel like it does. We'll basically go into Smartlead. And by the way, Smartlead has the best API when you look at any email like sender. And this is the main reason why we built around Smartlead. Like literally, I could not even like replace Smartlead if I wanted to. It literally runs and manages and is like our entire operating system in a way. But we basically uploaded Smartlead's API document and then we just type into Replit what we wanted to do, and then it'll build out the code for it. But anyways, one of the things that we've done is just grab all the active campaigns inside of Smartlead, and then we'll update the campaign settings daily. So it's not just sending at 9 a.m. every day. It's sending at like 8:55 or 8:57 or 9:03 or 9:07. So it just kind of updates those settings daily. We'll also run something to basically reconnect the failed email accounts twice per day. So this one's pretty big. And then we'll fetch the campaign mailbox stats weekly. So we just rolled this out like last week, I believe, where you can actually put a time frame between it. And so
Oh, yeah, that
we're
was
able
just
to just like
yesterday.
yesterday. Yeah. And so we had like a hacky way of doing it before. Now it's a lot easier because you could put in the time frame. But basically, you can like roll up your mailbox stats and see what your domain reply rate is on a weekly basis, right? And I think that one's huge, like being able to store that data because then you can like literally graph it and say, okay, this domain burnt out within 3 months. Oh, this provider that I have, whenever I use their infra, their domains burn out within 60 days. And then you could kind of build automations around that where it's like, okay, every 60 days, I'm going to do a check. And if domain reply rate is below X, I'm going to go ahead and create a new order. So you're able to build like better sustaining systems and kind of catch these deliverability issues prior to them actually happening. The other thing that we've done is like for all our inboxes that are added into our Airtable, we're able to just see if the record is there. It doesn't mean that it's actually authenticated, but the record is there, DKIM, SPF, mark. What we're actually going to do next is use Smart Delivery's API to basically automate test out of our email accounts to actually see if the records are passing, because Smart Delivery will literally tell you if the DKIM is passing or not. And then I mentioned this earlier with Microsoft tenants, you can see if they're disabled by doing an MX check. So we do that every day. And then the other big one is like sometimes you may not realize it, but your tenant is disabled. And usually the best way to identify that is like whenever you launch a campaign, your reply rate is literally zero. And so we have automations in place where if the reply rate is super low in the first 24 hours, we're able to just like come in and figure out what we need to do, supplement it with the backup accounts and kind of make that adjustment quicker. And then the other thing that we've done is made it to where when we launch campaigns, it automatically allocates the rotation that I mentioned earlier. So like whenever we launch the second campaign for a client, it will automatically choose the second hypertight order. And so those are some of the automations that we've built to kind of just be able to kind of, manage a lot of the deliverability stuff and just kind of track our data better. And so, yeah, that's basically all the stuff I wanted to talk about on deliverability. You guys want to do me a favor and subscribe to the YouTube channel? That'd be huge. Or just follow me on LinkedIn
Yeah.
or Twitter.
Drop us the link on the chat, man. Got a
Let me
couple
go
hundred
find it real
people
quick.
here. I think like we've got a ton of questions now, so we're gonna go through that for sure.
Yeah,
Ask all the questions in the chat that people have, and then post that. We will get everyone to just put their hands up. Whoever have questions, and we can go through the classic Q&A session that we have.
yeah, let's
But
do
yo,
it.
that was lit, by the way. You just swam through that like a beast. So that was awesome.
Yeah, it was cool. Let me do that.
Pop
Yeah,
it, pop
appreciate
it,
that.
pop it. Yeah,
Um,
no, for sure, man. For sure. Cool. I'm gonna drop in some questions over here, Nick, and we can sort of tag team on that. I didn't even. Okay. Y'all can put your hands up to ask your questions. We'll definitely go ahead and ask you to turn on your camera and pin you. But give us a moment. We'll have some of the questions answered from the chat that we have, and then we'll go straight into that. Cool. Nick, so there's a ton. So I'm gonna try find ones that are relevant, that are, to the point and intent of this office hours, which is not basic questions that are asked on LinkedIn and Twitter and all that stuff, which people can read, but very specific to you. Just FYI, by the way, getting Nick on board is very grateful to that, but extremely difficult. This man's very busy. Um, Sweet. Now, a question to ask over here, Nick, is for people who are a bit, I guess, a bit concerned with respect to Replit, you don't even know how to code, right? You just talk to it
oh
and
no,
gets everything done.
yeah, I don't know anything on coding. I'm
Lovely.
I like using Zapier and stuff, but like to actually code, I have no idea. Whenever I
Yeah.
found out Replit, that was like mind changing because like I had to do something with Mailreef's API. I was like basically like on their API, it was like there was an endpoint to list all the inboxes and then per server, and then what I was trying to do is I like figure out which server had the least amount of inboxes and domains, and then use that server to be the one where we make the new
Right, right,
inboxes.
right, 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 right,
And
right, right.
I don't really believe a lot of this stuff would work. And then I was just kind of like, prompting it, and then it gave me the code, and I gave it to my
Boom, boom,
developer,
boom.
and it was crazy because he was like, if I did that, it would have taken me at least 6 hours to do. And I was like, oh, this is insane. And so now, like, he's kind of old school, but we're forcing him to use Replit and kind of get used to it. Because I think, like, a non technical person, yeah, they could use Replit and it'll probably help. But I think if you give it to, like, an actual developer, it'll literally
It'll
just
be
make
full
them five
send.
times more
Yeah,
efficient.
full
Yeah.
send. I completely agree with you. Like I've gone crazy with Cursor nowadays. I actually code a lot more than I used to, simply because it's just so much easier to code nowadays. Otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
writing, random templated stuff. But sweet, tons of questions, but we'll go backwards on this. First question that I want to get answered with a bunch of people who have asked. I think one person asked it again and again. We've got Eric, who's already raised his hand, but maybe I'll answer his question. Um, Eric has always thought that having two inboxes per one domain was the way to do it, and all those domains under one tenant. But now each domain has its own tenant, and we can create 50 inboxes per domain. Is that what you're trying to suggest? I know I want to put the threshold over here at the very beginning for those who have been from the start and not till the end. Um, Nick was very clear saying what he says now is probably not going to be valid. I think you said like 6 months. I'm going to say maybe, in 2 weeks' time, this may not be valid
Yeah.
because like that's just how quick things move. But yeah, what are you seeing right now for us to set up with?
Yeah, so I think like the providers out there, there's a ton like Hypertide, Scaled Mail,
Mhm.
that do like the one domain 50 inboxes. Like I don't really know what they're doing. It's not like a legit inbox in the sense it's I think the setup is a little bit different, so it's weighted different. I would not recommend getting 50 actual inboxes on a
Yeah, yeah,
singular domain.
yeah.
I think what they do is something on Azure's communication API or like I really don't know, but I think it's weighted different. And so that's why I wouldn't recommend it. Even with like Mailreef, like they don't recommend more than 5 inboxes per domain. I mean, I think it to give you the answer, like I don't have a perfect answer, but I think it's not weighted the same. I also think that like it comes down to two things, right? So the volume that's being sent out per inbox, as well as the volume that's being sent out per domain. I think those are the two factors to kind of consider. So it's like if you have a regular Outlook inbox and you're wanting to send 15 to 20 emails per day, and you have 50 inboxes, that's a little bit too much volume that's coming out of that domain on a daily basis. So that's probably not the best setup. But with like Hypertide and Scaled Mail, like they're telling you to do literally like 1 to 2 cold emails per inbox, and they don't charge you on an inbox level; they charge you on a domain level. So hopefully that makes sense.
Fair enough, man. Okay, awesome. Lots of questions. We'll get some of them answered as we go. Nick, this is a stupid question. I'll ask later. But okay, with Mailreef, what's your two C's over there? Any particular gotchas that we need to focus on as we're getting Mailreef account set up? Anything that particularly matters, doesn't matter? Anything in terms of setups that we need to focus with respect to number of mails that we send a day, number of warm-ups that we send? What has worked, what has not worked?
Yeah. So when I spoke to Michael, he showed me like the setup that they have for like what they recommend to their users. I think we like to be conservative. We undershot it by 50%. So whatever like they say you can send per server, like the total volume that they recommend per month, we undershot that by like I think 50%. So we're sending way less volume per server than most users are. And then the other thing too is like by the time we actually have to use Mailreef, the domain would have probably warmed up for 45 to 50 days on average because we would have used the Hypertide previous to that. And so I think by doing that and kind of just using it as a backup, it's a great solution all the way through. Like I don't know what our average reply rate is through Mailreef, but whenever we kind of have it sit there for 45 plus days and then put it into a campaign, and then also just like undershoot the volume that we're sending per server by half, like it does pretty well.
Perfect. Awesome, man. Fair enough. Sweet. Ton of questions. We'll get them answered. FYI team, if you don't have your questions answered right now, join the Slack chat. We'll make sure those questions are answered for you over there as well. We got a ton of hands up. We'll get those we'll get those sorted out. We got Arcia sorry man, I'm gonna screw this up. But oh, we just lost you. All right. You were there for a second. Cool. He went. So we got Ken. Oh, sorry, we got Arcia back again. Arcia, do you mind? I'm gonna just pin user spotlight, and if you can just unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, sorry about that. I thought I was getting called on, so I lowered the hand.
It's all good.
Appreciate the presentation. I think this is just a relatively basic one. I use Mailreef for my lead gen. It does really well with my B2B, but I was doing some local business lead
Mm.
gen for a client and notice it feels like it's a completely different ballgame, like reaching out to like local business services. I'm just wondering like some best practices because it feels like I'm just out of my depth again, like starting from scratch. Like I can build a lead list on Apollo, but this feels like you got to find, I mean, personal emails and like at gmail.coms.
You broke up a little bit.
Just
I'm going
wanted
to
to
answer
know
real
if you with
quickly.
that and what
Yeah.
works. Or
Yeah. So
yeah, hit me.
this is something that we realized recently. If you're emailing at Gmail or like the personal email accounts, like we literally got a 0% reply rate. Like I don't think it delivers at all. I think personal email accounts have a way stricter spam filter. Um, And so yeah, like if your lead list has like the at gmail.coms or the at outlooks, like Mailreef is not going to be the solution there. I honestly don't know what would be the best solution to kind of inbox there, to be honest. But like yeah, for your B2B outreach, obviously like it does well, and that's predominantly what we do. I mean, it might be worth a test, but like just using regular at gmail.com accounts to do like volume towards like the personal emails might be the best way forward. I think I was talking to someone literally yesterday. They wanted to send 1 million emails a week to
Huh,
like
nice.
realtors and their at gmail.com account. And I was like, yeah, we're probably not gonna be the best person for that. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks.
Does that,
Thanks. Hopefully, does that answer your question, man?
yeah.
Yeah. All right. Easy. Cheers. I'm gonna move from spotlight. We get Ken. Ken, do you mind turning on your camera, sir? Without that, I cannot spotlight you. Okay. Looks like we'll have to wait for Ken to turn on his camera. We got Ken with the camera. Oh, we got the Ken off. Oh, damn it. This is party mode. All right, we'll just go. Oh, we got Ken in. All right. So just as a general rule, everyone, one question per note, please, because it can go on forever. Otherwise, I appreciate it. If there's any support questions, please don't on me. I am going to remove you from Spotlight, and we'll have those questions answered directly on the chats itself. Any one of our team members can jump on calls to help you out. So, onto the Spotlight. On to you, sir, Mr. Ken. Go for it. You need to unmute yourself, please. There we go.
Thanks. Can you hear me? So yeah,
Yes, sir.
I'm not doing 1 million a week, but we're doing about 25,000 a week, and most of them are to Gmail addresses, and it is possible to do it, but you need like a really good infrastructure partners. But that's basically kind of what I want to ask about. Like, by the way, Nick, you were involved with Scrubby. I've made millions of dollars through leads that we put through Scrubby, so thank you. It's a great tool. I appreciate it. But
Appreciate you for using
lately, it. Thank you. But no, recently though, there's these like new, I don't know, infrastructure tools, which I'm always like paying attention to. They're saying like 1 email a day, 2 email a day, no warm up. It used to be like 20 warm ups per day, 30 warm ups per day, and then ramp up to 20 emails per day. I don't understand what to do anymore. So can you please comment on that? Like, what is the warm up strategy versus, the number of emails, and how do you ramp up? Because I'd really like to understand it.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing I would say is that a lot of people say no warm up, and I think that like we've seen this time and time again. Anytime we don't warm up, it will maybe work for like the first day or two, and then it just completely dies within 2 weeks. And like we've done this with Mailreef accounts specifically. Like you'll literally get 0 replies when you don't warm that up at all. And then with Hybrid Tide, like it'll be good maybe for a week if you don't put warm up on, and then it just completely tanks. And tanks in the sense of like you will literally not get a single response. And so yeah, I would 100% keep warm up on. I think a reason why, and I think a lot of these info providers, what they're doing is they're all kind of different in its own way, and so you just kind of have to listen to their guides and their process because, like, obviously they have your best interest in mind of making sure you can land in the primary better. I think like a lot of the new ones that have popped up that are doing like the one domain with like tons of inboxes and then super low volume per inboxes. Like I really don't understand how the infra is built on the back end. So I can't really comment on it, but like I think they're not like legitimate inboxes in the normal sense where like you could go in and have a regular B2B communication like you would like with your Google Workspace that you use to communicate with like, your clients. Uh, and so it across all the inboxes and just keep that overall volume per domain low. And I think that's how it works. So hopefully that answers your question. I know it's kind of like
I
back
can
and
jump
forth
in
a
a
little
bit
bit.
as well.
The other
Sorry,
question I actually had for you though.
No, go for it. Finish up.
Yeah, go for it. Well, I was just gonna say, like, what are you doing right now to land in the Gmail?
Yes.
Well, we do, it's the 30, we ramped up to 30/20, which is like 30 warm ups per day, 20, max 20 regular emails per day. Really validated, like you said, Scrubby, like really, really heavily validated. And we personalize every single email using AI with Clay. Basically, we like just, there's no templates at all, no syntax. It's just every email is unique, and that works for us. But I don't know. I'm seeing like the new, like recently Smartlead rolled out like the new adding accounts, but the guidance versus warming up is different than what I was used to. So I'm just trying to understand, like, I don't know.
I can perhaps help you over here.
What's the best practices?
It's actually very similar to what Nick
Yeah.
said, Ken. Each of these vendors nowadays have a very different, like honestly, IP. Like some questions were, hey, how do this YZ do it? I actually don't know because they don't tell us. That's actually like, no, if people are asked how to smartly send emails, we obviously won't be revealing too much of that. But what we know is these people do provide results, and we've seen customers who got really good results. So that's how we select them. So I believe Inbox Infra have a particular setup that is more intuitive to low volume per mailbox spread across the domain. But there'll be another vendor that will add soon. That vendor will go ahead and say, no, send the normal warm up emails. It's a traditional Outlook account, 20 emails, 30 emails per day, warm them up for 2 weeks, all the run of the mill stuff that you see. So it's all specific to how each vendor does it, like similar to what you said. Now we go with an SMTP provider, they're going to have their own set of rules saying, do this, do this, do this, right? Candidly, I'm in the same boat as you, and I'm trying to figure out with each person and each vendor as to how they go and do it. But unless you're working with a unique, like overlaid infrastructure, the rudimentaries don't change. Get your mailboxes warmed up, get your copy warmed up, send 30 to 40 emails a day. That's about it.
And I think at the scale, like if you got a really big scale, just diversify, right? Just like get different providers, different
That is
whatever.
literally the whole point as to why we did
Yeah.
not go down the path of just being a Gmail vendor or an Outlook vendor. And we said, look, the whole premise here is every day this changes. Like if you join any of the office hours, I keep telling that what I tell you this week will be different next week. Outlook will shit its pants, then Gmail will shit its pants, and SMP will shit its pants. So just one click, buy, spread it up, see what works, and just oscillate between them every single week. So you're on the
I
money there.
appreciate I appreciate that because I've seen the recent like the vendors you've been adding for the new whatever is like
Source
build the
vendors, yeah.
vendors inside of
Mhm.
yeah, right. And it's like, yeah, just if you have big enough infrastructure anyway, just diversify. Because
That's it.
you don't want to get shut down all at once.
Pretty much.
Yeah,
right?
no,
That's what you want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, we literally had it happen like 2 years ago where we literally had like, 4,000 accounts just get cut off that day. I remember I got a message from B because he's like, dude, you're killing our Warmup network. I was like, oh, yeah, sorry about that.
Hey,
we had 60 shut down a month or two ago. And like just instantly Google shut down 60, just done. And like no notice, right? And it's like, what are you gonna do? You just moved to Outlook basically, and then it was fine. But yeah,
Go forward from those email accounts and instantly and see what it says. And then you'll figure out why.
Well, all right. Thanks, Ken. Have a beautiful
Thank
day.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we've got Sean, Evgeny, and we've got Joshua, and that's about it. We'll cap it at that. I'm gonna move from Spotlight. I'm gonna mute you, Ken. Sean, on to you, sir. At the Spotlight. All right. 1 second, mate. You're too keen. Just a second, sir. All right, go for it. Tailor-made. Love it.
Hey, Nick, thanks for bringing me on. So I'm like 8 months in, right? So I'm kind of drowning in information at the moment. My question is kind of like, I use Inbox Automate, who are a partner of Smartlead. I was under the impression that a lot of that stuff you covered early on in that session would have been covered by them. Am I wrong? Or because they're doing
they're good. I mean, if you create an inbox on there, you'll see that they're isolated per tenant and that they're like an actual, and if you go look up the reseller that they're using, it's legitimate all the way through. And so you won't find any issues with either Infra Inbox or with
Inbox Automate.
Inbox Automate. Such similar names, so I run around. But yeah, like they're all isolating it. The biggest thing is that if you use a reseller and they're using an EEU or nonprofit panel, that's where the issue is. And if they're just grouping all your orders into one tenant, which neither of those providers do.
Excellent. That's really good. So I had nothing like major to worry about. Okay, cool.
We vetted the shit out of the vendors that we want because I know the second that even if we expose their brand name, it'll all pin back onto us. So don't worry. Even now, it's not like once they're there, it's sorted. Like we have very active checks with them. If there's any flags, any issues, any malpractices, any sort of things we pick up, it's a very different tone of conversation we have on our side. So don't worry, we got you back.
That's really reassuring. Thank you.
Cheers, mate. Bye. Cool. Evgeny, on to you, sir. Remove from Spotlight. We've got Evgeny, add to Spotlight. And all yours, sir. Go for it.
Well, thanks for this great presentation. So my question is, I don't personally use resellers. I set the email boxes myself, and I have this issue with managing these SIM cards because Google limits the amount of verification you may have with one phone. So this whole issue that you can have only two Gmail accounts under one phone number, is there any specific trick to surpass this?
Yeah, there's a couple of vendors out there. I don't know which one the team uses or which one that is recommended right now, but there's a couple of like SMS. I think one of them is called like smsverify.com,
SMS Man,
smspool.com.
SMS Verify is there, SMS Pool's
Yeah.
there too. Yeah.
So you can rent numbers for them for like, 30 minutes, and then it'll send the verification code to there, and then you can use that to kind of get in and all that stuff, and then turn off the
So
MFA.
so I don't have to have like real physical SIM cards for
No,
some.
no, you're
Okay.
good. So, but the good thing, one thing to keep in mind though is like you should go identify like 3 to 5 of those vendors, because what happens I think is like Google identifies uh the phone numbers between from like one vendor, and then they'll like kind of block them for like a week or so. And so if you have another vendor in place, you can just use their numbers in place. And so I mean, and this is like across the entire board of like cold email, just diversify as much as you can. It just sets you up for more long-term success. And this is more like super important if you run a lead gen agency. Like if I look at when we've had the most high churn months, it all just came back down to like some infrastructure issue, in a lot of regards. So yeah, just diversify across the board.
Okay, thanks.
Cool.
Easy, man. Cheers. Thank you for that. We got Joshua. Got two, 1 second. Move from Spotlight. We get to Spotlight. Alrighty, go for it, mate.
Hey, thanks. Thanks,
Nice.
Nick. Thanks for your time. I'm a huge fan of your videos on YouTube, especially. So this question,
Appreciate that.
I watched your podcast with Eric the other day, and you mentioned something about domain age being like an important factor in deliverability. So consider this scenario, okay? So you've got like a bunch of age domains, and then you realize that these domains, they're not performing well. So at what point do you like decide to kill the domains, or are they worth rescuing? Like, what's your thought process in such a scenario?
Yeah, so V might actually be better and have more data behind this, but I actually used to kill the domain really early on, right? Like as soon as I saw the reply rate become pretty low being below 1%, I would just kill the domain, kill the inboxes, and then get a new one and start that process. What I'm realizing though is, well, domains cost a lot over time, and like that's a lot of money that you'll probably spend and allocate to a client. And so we've been just keeping them on Warmup for 30 to 45 days. And when we turned the campaign back on, it usually does pretty well. And then it does have less of a shelf life than it did before. So like if it went from day 1 to, let's say, day 45 before it got to that 1% reply rate, and then we put it on a 30-day warm up, put it back into a campaign, it may only last like 15 to 20 days. That's kind of like the consensus that I've been kind of seeing on average. But yeah, that's pretty much that. But if you have a better answer there, I'd actually would be interested in hearing as well.
So I don't want to, it's very specific, man. I think the way I tend to look at it is a domain. So we did see this in the past, right? And I think we even had people come on over here where they said that domains that were aged when Gmail accounts or Outlook accounts created, they actually perform quite well compared to new domains. And we saw this thing now where some people started sharing, at least internally with DMs, that Google seems to go ahead and have this flag filter come in saying that this domain is new, or be wary that it's less than 1 day old or 2 weeks old or 3 weeks old. Assumably so they're doing that specifically using SEMrush or what's it called? Something Spam Eating Monkey, which is SEMrush as well. They have a 30, 15-day, it's not a blacklist, it's a whitelist. So it's not necessarily a blacklist, it's just a whitelist that disappears. But TLDR, my rule of thumb is actually straightforward. If it gets blacklisted, I don't bother. It's just too much of a headache. I just get the new domain and I move on. Unless that domain is something that I've had for a really long time, then I tend to try to rescue it. But if it's just a burner domain that I bought as a secondary, market or whatever, if it gets blacklisted by something severe, and I see the results actually drop, just move on. The amount of time I'm going to take to email those people, get them to remove it, justify and cry, whinge and beg, say that, hey, I'm not this, etc. I can just get something new once it gets started sending.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Cheers, man. All the best. All right, we got Eric back again. Last one. All right, let's go for it. And we got Pin. All right, sir.
All right. Hey guys, thanks for letting me ask a question. Hey Nick, what's going on, man? Thanks for reaching out to me when I
Absolutely.
had my surgery. Good to talk to you. But hey, look, I've never tried Apollo. I've always tried ZoomInfo. And furthermore, my niche is construction, industrial construction. So I pay for this thing called PECWeb, the Industrial Info Resources. So I get, I would say like 95% of my emails from industrial info resources. And then the other 5% are from ZoomInfo. I looked at the pricing of Apollo, and it is crazy how affordable it is. And I, I don't know. Like I'm like shocked about the the amount that it costs, and I wanted your guys' opinion. Um, are Apollo leads good enough if you verify them, like verify the shit out of them?
Yeah. No, I think like if you look at like best bang for your buck, like I think Apollo right now on the data side is that. And there's tons of ways to grab the data out of Apollo for cheaper and quicker. So like the one thing that Apollo says is like I think they still say it on the website, it'll say like unlimited emails. Doesn't really mean that. They have like a limit on it. They also make it super hard to export out of the app. Um, unless you're on like one of their enterprise plans. But if you just type in like Apollo leads extractor online, you'll find like 4 or 5 different tools where you could literally copy your filters from Apollo, and then copy the search link and then literally put it into a tool. And some guy dropped in exportapollo.io as well, which is
All right.
it does exactly that.
That's awesome. One of my clients, they pay $60,000 for industrial info resources with all those construction emails. So like, I pay for ZoomInfo for like it's like 15 grand, which is pricey. But when I saw Apollo, I'm trying to scale my email marketing side of the business, and I'm gonna give it a shot, man. So thank you for all
Yeah,
the
yeah.
tips.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think Apollo will not cost you more than like $500 a month. And that's for like,
Yeah,
scraping like a million leads or whatever.
it's crazy. All right, awesome, sweet. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Alrighty. Okay, so whoever stayed back all the way here, you're gonna 5 lucky winners. Gonna go get 12,000 email verification credits. That's for a fact. And any other questions that were asked over here, feel free to drop them in the Slack channel. I've shared that. I'll share it again just because I know we're gonna ask for it. So I'll drop it again one more time. So we have it invite and how to scrape other tools is not an answer I can give you in another Zoom company. So sorry, that's something I can't do. Sweet. For Nick, for everyone who wants to find Nick Abraham, it's honestly dead simple. LinkedIn, Nick Abraham, or x.com, Link Abraham. That's all you need to focus on. And you should be, oops, no, that's and that's what you
Yeah,
get.
give it a thumbs up to that, right?
And you get a thumbs up. All right. Everyone, as always, office hours every Thursday. Next one might be a little slow because we got our offsite, but we're going to be having deliverability challenges happening every week now. We got experts coming in every week to go through your smart delivery reports, since a ton of you have started running those. Nick, thank you so much for these insights. Everyone who wants access to this, it is going to show up on YouTube in 24 hours, so you have access to that as well. You want to find him, like I said, LinkedIn, x.com, or twitter.com, as well as a fantastic place. Nick, thank you for your time. Thank you for this. It was absolute banger. We've had so many people stay back. It's not happened in the past before. So any passing thoughts, or it's all good from your side?
No, that's it for me.
Easy, man. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day, everyone. Cheers and thank you. Goodbye.
Absolutely. Bye, guys.